Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
After Dita left, the uncle sat on the bench, blowing big clouds of smoke from his pipe. He did not speak and kept looking at the ground. Meanwhile, Heidi looked around. She found the goat shed and peeked inside, but it was empty. She kept looking and saw 3 tall fir trees behind the hut. The wind made the branches sway and roar. Heidi stood still and listened. When the wind became quieter, she walked back to her grandfather. He was still sitting the same way. Heidi stood in front of him, folding her arms behind her back. She looked at him silently. The old man looked up. "What do you want to do now?" he asked. "I want to see inside the hut," Heidi said. "Come then," he said, standing up. "Bring your things too." "I don't need them anymore," Heidi answered. The grandfather gave her a sharp look. Heidi's dark eyes were shining with excitement. "Why don't you need them?" he asked. "I want to run like the goats," she said. "All right, but bring them anyway. We will put them in the cupboard." Heidi obeyed. The old man opened the door, and Heidi followed him inside. The room was big and covered the whole hut. In one corner, there was a table and a chair. In another, the grandfather's bed. A large kettle hung over the hearth. Across the room, a big cupboard was built into the wall. The grandfather opened it. Inside, there were some clothes on one shelf, shirts, socks, and towels. On another shelf were plates, cups, and glasses. The top shelf had a round loaf of bread, some bacon, and cheese. Heidi pushed her things to the back of the cupboard, hiding them behind the clothes. She looked around carefully and then asked, "Where will I sleep, grandfather?" "Wherever you want," he said. That made Heidi happy. She explored every corner to find a nice place. Beside the old man's bed, she found a ladder. She climbed up and discovered a hayloft full of fresh-smelling hay. A small round window let her see far down into the valley. "I want to sleep here," Heidi called. "Come and see, grandfather." "I already know," he answered. "I am making my bed now," Heidi said excitedly. "But I need a sheet." The grandfather took out a coarse cloth from the cupboard and climbed up. Together, they made a soft bed. Heidi looked at it and said, "Grandfather, we forgot something." "What?" the grandfather asked. "I have no cover. At home, I always sleep between a sheet and a cover," Heidi said. "What if I don't have one?" he asked. "That's okay. I can use more hay to cover myself," Heidi said and started to grab some hay. "Wait a moment," the grandfather said. He went down to his bed and took out a big, heavy linen bag. Bringing it to Heidi, he asked, "Isn't this better than hay?" Heidi tried to open it, pulling with all her strength, but it was too heavy. The grandfather placed it over her bed. "Now I have a wonderful bed and a warm cover. I wish it was already nighttime so I could sleep in it," Heidi said happily. "But don't you think we should eat first?" the grandfather asked. Heidi had been so excited about her bed that she forgot about food. Suddenly, she felt very hungry. She had only eaten a small piece of bread and some thin coffee early that morning. "Oh, yes, we should eat, grandfather," she agreed. "Then let's go," he said, following her downstairs. At the fireplace, the grandfather moved the big kettle aside and took a smaller one hanging from a chain. He sat on a three-legged stool and lit a bright fire. When the kettle boiled, he put a large piece of cheese on a long fork and held it over the fire. He turned it slowly until it was golden brown on all sides. Heidi watched with wide eyes, then suddenly ran to the cupboard. When the grandfather brought the food to the table, he found it already set: 2 plates, 2 knives, and bread in the middle. "You know how to think for yourself," he said, smiling. He placed the cheese on the bread. But something is still missing. Heidi saw the steaming pot and ran back to the cupboard. She found only one bowl, but behind it, she spotted 2 glasses. She grabbed all 3 and brought them to the table. "You can take care of yourself." "But where will you sit?" the grandfather asked. Heidi ran to the hearth and brought back a small stool. "That stool is too low." "You are too little to reach the table from my chair," he said. He placed the bowl of milk on his chair and pushed it close to Heidi. "Now eat," he said, giving her bread and cheese. Heidi drank all her milk in one go. Then she took a deep breath and set down her empty bowl. "How do you like the milk?" the grandfather asked. "I have never tasted better," Heidi said happily. "Then you shall have more," he replied, filling her bowl again. Heidi ate and drank with great joy. When she finished, she followed her grandfather to the goat shed. The old man swept the floor and put fresh straw down for the goats to sleep on. Heidi watched him carefully, interested in everything he did. Then he went to a small shop next to the shed and quickly made a high wooden chair. Heidi was amazed. "What is this, grandfather?" she asked. "This is a chair for me." "I know, because it is so high. And you made it so fast," she said, full of wonder. The grandfather smiled. "She knows how to pay attention," he thought. Next, he walked around the hut, fixing anything that was loose. He hammered nails into boards and made small repairs here and there. Heidi followed him everywhere, watching closely. As the evening came, the tall fir trees rustled in the wind. A strong breeze roared through the branches, making a deep, wild sound. Heidi's heart filled with happiness. She danced and jumped under the trees, feeling as if something magical had happened. The grandfather stood in the doorway, watching her with quiet amusement. Suddenly, a sharp whistle echoed through the air. Heidi stopped dancing and listened. Then she saw Peter coming down from the mountain with the goats. Excited, she ran into the middle of the flock, greeting them one by one. When they reached the hut, 2 slender, beautiful goats stepped forward, one white and one brown. The grandfather held out some salt in his hand, and the 2 goats eagerly licked it up. Heidi gently stroked their soft fur, overjoyed. "Are they ours, grandfather? Do they live with us? Will they sleep in our stable?" she asked excitedly. Yes, yes, of course, the grandfather answered, smiling at her enthusiasm. After the goats finished the salt, the old man said, Heidi, go inside and bring your bowl and some bread. Heidi ran into the hut and returned quickly. The grandfather milked the white goat and filled her bowl. Then he cut a piece of bread and gave it to her. Eat now, he said. Then you can go to bed. If you need any clothes, there is a bundle in the cupboard. Aunt Dita left it for you. Good night, grandfather. Heidi called. Oh, please tell me their names. The white one is Schwanli, and the brown one is Barley, he replied. Good night, Schwanli. Good night, Barley. Heidi called as the goats disappeared into the stable. She sat down on the bench outside to eat. But the wind was so strong that it nearly blew her off her seat. She hurried to finish her meal, then ran inside and climbed up to her cozy hay bed. She slept as well as a prince on his royal bed. Soon after, the grandfather also went to bed. He always woke up with the sunrise, and summer mornings in the mountains came early. That night, a wild storm shook the hut. The wind howled through the chimney, and the trees swayed violently. Dry branches snapped off and crashed to the ground. In the middle of the night, the grandfather woke up. She must be afraid, he thought. He climbed up the ladder to check on Heidi. At first, everything was dark. Then the moon came out from behind the clouds, shining a soft light over Heidi's bed. Her cheeks were rosy, and she lay peacefully on her round little arms. A gentle smile played on her lips, as if she was dreaming of something wonderful. The grandfather watched her for a moment. Then a cloud covered the moon, and darkness returned. Quietly, he climbed down and went back to his bed.